I'm afraid that with such distinguished guests, it will be very difficult to close our debate in only 50 minutes, but we'll try to focus on this question from our title of our debate. And I would like to start from Mr. Zbigniew Jagiełło. More general question for the beginning to you. Establish industry dialogue, market partnership, some links between private and public sector is much easier when we have some standards, norms in this field. Where are we in terms of standardization and norms in the field of trust services and AID, in your opinion?
Thank you very much for the invitation. When I look at this title, Market Dialogue, I'm smiling because dialogue is not only for the market, dialogue is for human. We are human, so without talking, exchanging views, understanding each other's needs some kind of standards. Because if you are speaking in different languages, it will be difficult for us to understand each other's. So therefore, for example, in order to have a dialogue between humans, our so-called bad English is the best form of exchanging views, opinions, and information. So therefore, when I'm looking at such as hard things like business is, therefore also in the business we need standards. Yeah? So it could be difficult for us as a consumers, as a customers, to do things when the standards are different. Therefore, when I'm talking with my friends, colleagues who are acting to introduce electronic signature at the market, my first question is whether you are talking with your colleagues from other companies, competitors, yeah? Because without talking each other's, it will be difficult to introduce standards. Please imagine, for example, when if we are football players and each of us has a different rules, yeah? It will be maybe interesting for audience to look at this game, but it will be very, very difficult to understand who has a right, who win, who lose, and so on. So therefore, my ask to you as competitors, talk together, try to find a standard, then go to customers, because finally, your service is not for you. Your offer, your product is for customers, and without they acknowledge that it's acting in the same way, despite whether it's delivered by company ABC, because company ABC could differ each other regarding in the case of this electronic signature, whether this service is safe, whether this service is how to say, quick, fast, and finally, the questions about the price. Thank you.
Thank you very much, but one additional question to you. What about balance between norms, standards, and innovation? Aren't you afraid that too much norms, too much standards will kill innovation in this area?
Absolutely not, because the question is whether this is the change, because innovation means a change in the case of current situation, is for customers, and they could accept this change, but customers would like to use something before the change is making. Because if this is the beginning, it doesn't mean that this is something accepted by customers, that this is a standard.
Thank you very much. Of course, we are talking about future, about norms and standards in this area. But now let's talk about reality. And I have a question to Sławomir Szopietowski about situation today and here. And in the center of this ongoing digital transformation, trust services, in my opinion, seems to still be a hard pill to swallow for many businesses and public administration bodies. In your opinion, why this situation is still so strong for trust services?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Well, it's a good question. And actually, looking at that from the perspective of someone who advises primarily the financial services business, I would answer in one sentence that, well, it depends what comes before or after. That matters if it's hard pill to swallow, because if we look at this from the perspective of this so-called regulatory tsunami for the recent years, often touching the financial services players, with the AML requirements on KYC, with the quite recent, almost 3 years, Payment Services Directive that imposed certain requirements on strong customer authentication, and also the communication with so-called third-party providers, so the new services providers that are knocking to the door to the bank to ask for information on the account of the user or initiating payment. Well, I would say that looking at that regulatory background, I think that there are lots of, at the regulatory level, stimulators to use and develop trust services and digital identity. And actually, those mentioned regulations in their new edition or in the process of revision, primarily PSD2, now it's under consultation, and also the proposal of the European Commission around so-called open finance, is directly referring to trust services, is looking for an answer how actually it should be put together in one basket, a little bit referring to the previous question, is like how to put a common standard to make this whole players working together in the same way. But coming back to the reality now, I think that based on those financial services, payment services experiences, I'm observing a lot of initiatives, a lot of new ideas around building this sort of identification tools, authorization tools, and of course they are not yet fully flesh and bone in a sense that, well, they may not serve you in front of the public authorities, but they can play a significant role in a business-to-business or consumer-to-business or even consumer-to-consumer relationship that gives us a dose of certainty, who am I dealing with? And I also see that banks are quite great ambassadors of this digital identity. I mean, first they had to comply, now they are trying to monetize on this. So they have lots of good tools, technologically, organizationally, to propose some solutions. So I would say there is quite a lot of things that are around trust services, digital identification, digital identity going on. It's lacking standards, and it's lacking a common reference for the sake of the user who is distributing here and there lots of data and wondering where is it going to be used and how is it going to be used, etc. Also by the providers, because, well, the customer journey is one of the primary goals, so everyone wants to make things quick and smooth, and they have GDPR, so they have to ask lots of questions and display plenty of tick boxes and etc. But they are coming along with this. Well, the outcome of this testing and trying is that great, because we are open to some new solutions, and regulations are generally neutral on the technology side, but at the same time, there is still a huge risk on the privacy side and on the cybersecurity side. It is, and I think that calls really for the standardization.
Thank you very much, but do you agree with me that nowadays we have lack of understanding of trust services amongst business users?
Well, I think that defining this very narrowly, yeah, probably, well, not everyone knows it. It's primarily linked with the public administration. And as I mentioned, well, as a everyday person, I'd rather use my bank to help me with my digital identity than then go straight to the main source, because this is my kind of natural counterparty. And I think that the last 2 years naturally pushed us in this digital world. So, well, lack of understanding in a sense, well, what does it mean for me? Am I at risk, or what about my data, etc.? I think we are more accommodated to these new solutions, especially that lots of businesses are using them, have to use them, and also in a relationship with the customers. This is developing. So electronic signature, I think, well, it jumped into our ecosystem and it stays. I think we need a bit more of a promotion of that. But in the world of digital finance, e-commerce, and contracts, I think we are quite aware of this. The trouble is, and again, I'm referring to standardization, is that whatever you have, it doesn't work anywhere else. So again, I think people might feel like, well, yeah, I'm going to use it just for this particular purpose, but is it really dealing with all my matters? I still have to be on paper. I still have to circulate documents. So why bothering, actually, if at the end of the day I have to do this? It calls also for a change of processes, because lots of organizations, lots of firms have the analog processes. And even myself, I'm sometimes contracting clients, and they say, well, that's great that you signed it off electronically. Could you please send us the hard copy signed with pen? Well, okay, why you need this? So I just signed it. Yeah, you know, but it's for our files. Then we digitalize this, of course, because we'll make a PDF on this. So I think, yeah, we are getting there. I mean, the more it will be used, and the natural demand and the call for your counterparty will be, no, please don't send it to me in paper. We'll jump into that.
Thank you very much. Of course, if you would like to add something to this answer, so feel free, especially if you would like to disagree with something. So.
I have a question because, as I understand, you are a lawyer. So, lawyers like standards or not?
I know, lawyers definitely like standards. And I'm definitely supporting standards. I mean, I don't know if every lawyer likes standards. I think, well, the lawyers like standards and non-standards, because if there are no standards, you can always do your lawyering. But me, as a regulatory lawyer, I like standards, but I like developing standards. That's why what I appreciate in some of these regulations I've already mentioned, that there is a recurring revision of the regulation. If we are talking about digital world, it's always a question, what comes first? I mean, is it the things that are happening or the regulation that sets them up? And with PSD2, for example, it was the second. I mean, it was going on. Someone just thought like, well, we have to kind of frame it, control it a little bit. So I think if we revise this, assuming the neutrality on the technological side, then we can simply follow the development of new protocols, new ideas, and then the regulation can just follow to make sure it's done safe. And I think that this is where we primarily need standardization, but of course for the communication as well. If we want to go global, we need to have a common standards.
Great, thank you. I will come back to this issue of standards in next few questions, but now let's go to the business point of view, and I have a question to Radosław Semko. Partnership, be it in the market or between public and private entities, seems to be a major factor to consider in the field of electronic identification and trust services. And is the issue a lack of trust in the singular company to provide such a powerful and important tool, or is the complexity too high for one single company? What is your opinion?
First of all, I have to say that I promised to myself that, Radek, do not speak about the football today. Promise.
Yes, after yesterday match.
After yesterday evening,
good
yeah?
decision.
So the answer, yes, of course, there is the issue. Because I have the comments to the whole entire participants. It was a pleasure to be here, because I knew that it would be the very interesting discussion. But nowadays I can see only one lawyer when I could find out, which like the standard and would like the clear understanding. I will explain why. So going then, of course there is the issue because we, as a huge company with so many customers, we wanted to deploy the biometric signature. And finally, as you could observe yesterday, we failed. We failed due to so many interpretations, so many misunderstanding of the regulation. That was not the technical issue. We could deploy our solution and give the proper processes to our sales branch. Whatever, that was so many discussion during the launch the project that we failed and we stepped back to previous standard signature. So answering on your question, yes, that's as a business perspective, we need such a strong standardization and strong leadership. What are the rules, even if some standardization, even some protocols are announced, how to introduce in our regulation, in our country, in our environment. Because still we are competing and we wanted to be, because we observed that our competitors use the previous standards, we wanted to be the better because we spend the money, so we want to be much more effective. And we thought that if we move forward, we will achieve better. End of the day, we had to step back. We have to step back because so many regulation was unclear and no one was able to make a proper recommendation for us. So I like your appreciation for standardization as a lawyer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, but I have one additional question to you too. Because we are focusing on trust services and AID in our discussion. But of course, digital services are not only these two services. And would you say that other branches of digital transformation are progressing at a different rate or are benefiting more from market dialogue and cooperation?
Yes, we can observe because we deliver different kind of services in so many industries. I can see that identity and ID has strong regulation constraints, and as we can observe in TV or mobile channels, there is not such a strong regulation. So we could observe that's even the same service delivered by different channels has a different regulation, and we are not able to deliver the same content, the same services, which is depend on the sector. So the answer is yes, we observe the different speeds for development, for facing with some mental limits, some regulation limits, and I'm sorry for saying that, but I'm engineer, so I thought that everything is possible. So I fully agree with this, that we can deliver everything, but we have to face with some society limits and with some regulation, which for my understanding is still not clear and not good enough for our expectation.
Thank you very much. I think that for lawyers, is the same rule. Everything is possible. Okay, Wim, let's talk about European level, European point of view on this issue. How are trust services and AID solutions different from other digital tools, which in the case of Europe are more readily adopted by businesses?
Well, I think I'm going to start with an example. If you take a contract, an electronically signed contract, and you take away the electronic signature, but you trust the other party, and you shake hands on the contract, then you still have a valuable contract. If you do the other way around, and you take away the contract, and you only have the electronic signature, then you don't have any value. And so, in fact, the electronic signature on your contract will reduce your risk that the contract will not be acknowledged and will not be executed. And so, in fact, trust services are a risk mitigation tool. And so, the business always has the option to treat risk as they want. And either they can accept the risk or they can mitigate the risk, but mitigating the risk with trust services comes always at a cost. A financial cost, an implementation cost, an onboarding cost, there's always some kind of cost. And so business will always take the balance between the benefit of risk reduction and the cost that it entails. And so finding that balance is quite difficult. And that's the reason why it's not always easy to sell trust services. If you have other digital services, other ways of going from paper to paperless, that's much easier. In trust services, there's a lot of compliance stuff to do and stuff like that. And so it's a very complex stuff to do, which is not always necessary. If you can accept the risk, or if you can find another way to mitigate the risk, then maybe you don't always need trust services. And so that's, in my opinion, the reason why not only trust services are sometimes a hard sell, and the easiest way to sell it is by creating something which is very easy to use, where the cost is reduced as well financially as other types of cost, where as well the signer, for instance, has a very easy journey, but also the relying party, the business party that needs the signature and stuff like that. And so that's how you create successful trust services. With ItsMe, we focused from the start to make it as easy to use as possible. At this moment, 80% of adults in Belgium are using ItsMe. The amount of qualified signatures that are created with ItsMe are increasing every month. The amount of partners that are asking to include ItsMe within their signature creation application is increasing at a rate that I never expected. And so creating something which is easy to use and which is cost effective, not only financially but also other types of cost, can help you to build a successful trust service. But you always have to take into account that balance between the benefit and the cost. And that's also, in my opinion, the reason why trust services are driven by legislation rather than that they have a reducing factor due to legislation. So the eIDAS legislation, without the eIDAS legislation, trust services would not have been possible. And you see that now also with eIDAS version 2, where in eIDAS version 2 there is the concept of the wallet, the concept of attribute attestations which are added. And all of a sudden, these are topics which, where trust businesses are very interested in to deliver them. And that's because all of a sudden, legally, there is a value in providing them. And because legally there's a value in providing them, they can do risk reduction, and that means that it becomes interesting within other business processes.
Thank you very much. I have now a question to Zbigniew Jagiełło. Because in general, I think that we all agree that private sector is a little bit ahead of the public sector in adoption and development of digital services. And do you think, is it possible to build this cooperation between private and public sector without this balance in adoption of digital services? Is it possible in this situation, or we have to find first some way, some solution, how to speed up this adoption in public sector?
Thank you. This is a good question. How to do this? Because usually the innovation or new ideas coming from private sector, then some kind of businesses looking whether this kind of service product could be used by so-called administration or public service. And in this case, we have such a situation. In my opinion, once again, I would like to say that very, very important is to try to create cooperation between competitors. Because finally, if we leave such a privilege to introduce a standard by lawyers from administration, for sure it will be against business. That's my, experience. And looking at this AID, it's obvious for me that people, despite whether they are working in private business or in public business or in administration, they need it. So the most important is to find a way how it's introduced in order to increase the size of the market, and such as, how to say, very wide understanding, because usually the acceptance of using so-called advanced or electronic innovation is very strong connected with the age. Means that if you are older, like me, your adaptations for innovations are lower. Yeah, I'm smiling talking about this because from time to time I'm meeting, my friends from secondary school, and the adoptions of innovations like using, smartphones or, banking applications, other applications, based on the situation whether in my life I use it. Yeah, because if there are people, lawyers, for example, doesn't use this, so they prefer old solutions than new one. So as soon as regarding AID in Poland, for example, we set up such as common standard, then year by year we could increase market share, size of the market, which use this AID signature and other solutions connected with this. Then finally, because my personal experience when I would like to use AID was, why it's not used in such a simple way that I log in to the website, then load it to my electronic device, then I use it. Yeah. Up to now, as I see, it is supported by assistants who do it. So simplification is also the way to increase the size, the size of the market in this case. And also my question to when I hear my colleague from right side when he talking about, I ask whether you prefer standard or not. Your answer was proper, means that you accept this. But the next question to you is whether you prefer simple standards or complex standards.
Thanks. I never received so many positive comments at one panel as a lawyer. That's great. And
because we are engineers.
I will try to keep that good impression, because I think, well, complexity kills the innovation. I mean, the more detailed we are, the more troubles are, because, well, if you just follow the instruction, then until the new, version of the given act or regulation, you just got stuck. I mentioned that earlier, that this technological neutrality is a must. So yes, we have to set up standards, but not like really writing the whole protocol for everyone participating, because we will never learn from them. And I think when we speak about the cooperation, collaboration, public, private, we have some examples of that on the market, the Polish market. Also, European Commission now is launching a tender for the second edition of a blockchain sandbox. And this is, I think, the way forward. I mean, if the industry is not like addressing the fears of regulators and authorities are not learning from them.
Could you be so kind to answer for my question, whether you prefer simple
as I
or
said,
more complex?
I mean, no.
Lawyer.
There is no 0-1.
As a lawyer, I should say, how would you define a simple and structured? But I say, no, I'm for simplicity. Let's put it more like a framework than really getting into details.
I would like to be polite with Zbyszek because I agree, of course, with him that we as a commercial branches, we can cooperate to giving some standards, but in opposite, I disagree. I would like to mention some example from Baltic country, Arabic country, or even Ukrainian or Belarus, where is the governmental platform and forms one solution for other participants for the market. And as we can observe, even in Ukrainian, the EID is much common in Poland. That's the easy step. The government enforce one approach, one solution, and rest of the market adapted immediately. In the opposite, of course, there are some many positive examples when the commercial company agreed on some standards and they deploy itself. But still, there are two ways. In myself, I prefer the governmental approach.
So I have a very short question about the standardization process, and please feel free who will answer these 3 questions. First, do you believe in rather hard regulations in standardization process, or maybe it's possible some self-regulation of the market in this area? This is the first question. Second question, especially to business, don't you afraid that after standardization it will be cheaper for business, or rather not, because it's different? And last question in this part. Nowadays we have a lot of companies on this market, and what do you think after standardization? It will be the market will open for new players in this field, or rather it will be more closed for new companies?
Actually, I do think that standardization is helping new players to enter the market. If you've got a big player who's got a non-standard solution, then you've got a lock-in effect. And so I'm convinced that open standards will help the whole sector. And because the lock-in effect will kill the possibility of competition, in fact. And it's competition that drives innovation. And so if you have a lock-in effect due to a lack of standards, then innovation will be much lower and the market will much less develop. And so I'm convinced that open standards can really drive market acceptance and create the market. That does not say that a standard should be a monopoly. You should also have competitive standards next to well-adopted standards. And so it should be possible to adopt a different standard than the one that is the main standard at that moment. If there are advantages to that new standard, then after a while it might take over and it might become a better solution. And so standards, I'm all for it, but it should be an open world. And it should be possible to adopt new standards as well, which compete with the existing standard.
Great. So about regulation, hard regulation or self-regulation, what is more possible?
Usually, administration always has lower knowledge about the product or the service than business. So, self-regulation first, but if there is no self-regulation, then administration enter to the market and deciding about something. Yeah, then we have this what you said that they usually over-regulate the idea. Then we have a problem to be profitable, to develop this service, and so on.
Thank you. So it will be cheaper for business if we will have standardization?
Generally speaking. Because, of course, it depends. The simple answer is, of course, yes. in long term, every standard decrease the price, decrease the maintenance, decrease the future development. And of course, I agree that decrease the initial barrier. If you want to enter some markets and you have the same standard, you can replicate your solution.
Okay, unfortunately,
I would like also, because before this panel, I discussed with some colleagues about the subject of this, and my question to us was, why still we have so many standards for such a simple thing like charger for smartphone is, yeah? And there is a lack of regulation because this is nothing, how to say, innovate. This is not a strategic advantage for companies who produce a smartphone and only know a charger produced by them is okay with this device, yeah? So my question, if there are some people from regulation, please do it.
Yeah, yesterday I think that European decided to have one standard of chargers to mobile phones. I'm wondering is it will be finished in the next few years. But unfortunately, I know that 40 minutes is absolutely too less to discuss this issue with you. But we have to make some summary after today's conference. So maybe in short, a few words, if you would like to summarize the most significant obstacles and opportunities identified at the moment. So what would they and why?
Well, maybe very, very briefly.
Yes, please, very briefly.
I think it's an obstacle and an opportunity. This is what we've just discussed, that there is a variety of solutions. So that can boost up the innovation, but at the same time, it's a threat because everyone will do their own way. So coming back to the common platform, how the things should go. And for me, purely from the regulatory perspective, this interconnection of the regulations on the trust services, digital identity, with the other regulations that are touching this field, this is absolute must because both providers and users will go mad with the different solutions in different channels of communication. And we definitely need to put this at the European level, but also at the local level, together in one basket. Thank you.
I would like to add that what I said at the beginning, that very, very important for competitors is to set up your own standard. This self-regulation has a lot of, how to say, profits. For example, one of the most profitable company like FIFA is, set up standards and nobody could overcome it.
Thank you.
So one huge obstacle to find out who is making decision. I can describe our still the same project. That was a long discussion, are we gonna have a positive MVP for our deploying electronic signatures or not? And after many calculations, it appears that as an operator, we are not able to achieve positive MVP because the paper buying our dealers. So we are paying them, but they are paying outside the paper, so it's not inside our MVP. So we could not achieve the business case, yeah? That's apparently that appears that everyone is happy to get the positive impact of environment on the process and the customer satisfaction. That's sometimes it's I agree with previous session. That's a Mr. With the post with the lady. Sometimes is to make the decision point. That's the main obstacles.
Thank you. Wim?
I'm seeing two big obstacles. One is the legislative process. As I mentioned, for me, legislation is for trust services a real driver. But the eIDAS version 1 has shown that it has some lackings. There's quite some stuff in eIDAS version 1 which could be better. There is a lot of work being done on eIDAS version 2 to improve it. But as long as eIDAS version 2 is not out, then it's still completely unknown what it finally will be. And so that's something that holds business back. And then the second thing is, I think that in the sector we are really lacking skilled people. That the fact of that it's so difficult to find the right people for the right job, that is really holding the sector back as well.
Great, thank you very much. I hope that we will find some good regulations in this area, and we will avoid over-regulation. It's very important, and that it will be possible to speed up a process of adoption of digital services in public and private sector. And next year we will meet one more time, and we will maybe we'll be able to discuss about standardization, but in facts, not wishful thinking. Thank you very much.